It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Happy New Year. Almost. It's Logan Paulsen. I'm Craig Hoffman. Take Command podcast, film review time. Logan, this is our last pod of 2024.
I know, kind of crazy that we've done all these episodes, all these shows, and here we are still plugging away at it. Pretty cool.
Yeah, our first pod of 2025 will be the preview of the Cowboys game on Thursday, where the Commanders can win and seal up the 6th seed. But let's take a final look back at the win over the Falcons in overtime. A game where Jayden Daniels set a whole bunch of records. First quarterback since like Michael Vick to do that. Passes C.J. Stroud on the all-time rookie completions list for a single season. Does this, does that. First 100-yard game since RG3 in 2012 by a Washington quarterback, which is only the second in franchise history. And I think, Logan, when I watch this game, there are some drives where I'm just like, well, that's a Jayden drive. And I know that the narrative was like this was an entire Jayden game. And I do think like there's some other really great stuff that the offense does. But there is just some times where there's nothing going. Offensive line misses a block, missed assignment, goes the wrong way. Or sometimes they made some fixes in this game that I thought were really great along the O-line. We'll talk about those a little bit later. But then guys just didn't execute. You get beat one-on-one, and Jayden's got to make something happen. And he just did it time and time and time again. Made the right reads in the critical moments. Sometimes that read was get the hell out of Dodge and run. And, I mean, I think all of the even though there might be more to the game than just him, all the praise that is being heaped upon him, I think is absolutely valid and worthwhile.
No, I think 100%. I think, going back and watching his throws, going back and watching his runs, like it's a big deal performance, you know. And I think there is this tendency to be like, oh, it's him, but you know, football is the ultimate team game, you know. And so there are protection things. The backs did some good stuff from a protection standpoint. You look at OZ and his performance, look at Zach and his performance. I think you got to give credit where it's due. And I think you also got to look at the defense and their ability to kind of stand up in some key moments and make sure that he gets the ball back. And, specifically at the end of the game, right, where you have a 3-and-out kind of in your last 2-minute possession of the game. I think it was like a minute left on the clock. Give the ball back to them with 55 seconds. Like, good job. I wasn't the cleanest situation there by the defense, but to stand up, they missed the field goal. You get the ball back in overtime, you go down and score. Again, that's 2 weeks in a row, and we talked about this in the postgame show, where the defense kind of gives you a second bite at the apple, and he's able to, to make good on winning the game. So I do think Jayden Daniels deserves a ton of credit, but it's always just important for me just to acknowledge the other contributions from guys on the team and guys winning one-on-ones and doing good stuff for sure. But I think, and we're going to talk about this more in a second, this was upon rewatch, kind of a messy football game, offensively and defensively, and a little bit of that's the crew that's officiating the game. But they got lucky. They put themselves in some good spots, some terrible spots. Got bailed out a couple times, and I'm excited to talk about that in more detail as we go through it.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the officiating thing. Again, I'm not going to do another officiating rant, but I'm uncomfortable with how much the referees inserted themselves in this game, and just wanting seemingly to make calls in big spots, from the PI on Davis at the end to wiping away a touchdown on a Cosme hold. There was another one that went in the Falcons or in the Commanders' favor. I'm trying to remember what it was. One of the penalties where you're just like, that's pretty soft in a key spot. I mean, actually, you know what it was? It was the illegal contact on Ertz down the field, and technically correct call. But that's a pretty soft call on a 3rd and 22 that should have been a drive ender as the Commanders give up a sack, and instead they get a free first down, and then they go on the ugliest 15-play drive in NFL history and have it end in a touchdown. And that drive is actually one that I think is worth mentioning in terms of just kind of making it happen, right? They get the benefit of that call. But on that drive, which is a 15-play drive, there are 4 negative plays, I think, with 3 other or maybe it's 3 negative plays, 4 incompletions. It's 7 or 8 of the plays are negative plays or incompletions where you're going absolutely nowhere. There's a couple of other runs that are not considered successful based off of the success rate statistic. Mm-hmm. And yet they just find a way. Jayden has a couple of scrambles. And I think the thing sometimes with his scrambles too, Logan, that's really impressive is he just has an ability as a quarterback to process the entire field and have a kind of almost a all 22 bird's eye view. It feels like understanding of where people are. And so there's like one scramble, for instance, where they're flooding the left side of the field and it's man coverage. And he knows, like, if we're flooding left and I run, actually, I think they're flooding right. And if I run left and it's man coverage, there's going to be nobody there. And so he sees a crease and knows if I run, like, if I get out of this, like, I got a bunch of yards. And he goes and picks up, I think it's like a 9-yard scramble. And so the ability to understand where everybody is on the field, how players around him are going to move, I think is just such a special quality. And sometimes it's use that skill to read out a concept and make the right throw. And then other times I feel like he's able to use it to understand where there's big yardage available for him as a runner.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think his decision making as a scrambler in this game was pretty good. Obviously he takes a couple sacks trying to get out of the pocket, which you don't love to see. But again, like, I think the one you're describing is a 3rd and 5, and it just feels so effortless, and it's something that mobile quarterbacks, scrambling quarterbacks, however you want to characterize him. They just elevate the floor of the offense, because on that 3rd and 5, it's a little bit cloudy. Like there are places where you're like, maybe if he's really aggressive here, he can throw this football. But I think it's one of the things that I've loved about his game, especially as it's kind of gone through the season, you're getting more familiar with him as an NFL quarterback, is it's like, hey, I don't have to force this because of my ability to run, and I can get out of the pocket. And I think Brandon Coleman does a good job on that play of kind of collapsing the left end down, kind of just scoots out and I don't know, man. I don't know what it is since the bye. He just looks fresh. He looks fast. Like, guys are having a hard time dealing with his speed, and he's not like a 4.3 guy, I don't think, but he definitely his athleticism.
Probably a 4.4 guy though.
Well, it was funny. I was talking to some scouts before, and they're like, "Oh, I think he's probably a 4.5, 4.6 guy," and I was like, "Really?" Because he looks so much faster. But I guess the point of it is he plays in a way that you see his athleticism, you see his speed, you see his explosiveness, and it coincides with his decision making. Right? There are certain guys, certain scramblers, like Michael Vick, for example, who's just like faster. Right. And he would use it all the time. And that was his way of finding explosive plays in addition to taking shots down the field. Jayden, I feel like, is a little bit more selective about it. And that is the thing that is like his superpower. And you see it on some of these plays where it's 3rd and 5 and he doesn't take a big shot. He gets through, he makes a guy miss, whatever it is. And just in this game, like, obviously when you rush for over 100 yards and you don't have a ton of designed quarterback runs, it's because you're making really good decisions as a scrambler. And I didn't go back and chart this, but I think if you go back and look at a lot of his scrambles, they're on 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, 3rd and 2, he's able to get a first down. And so that is something, again, that just brings the floor of the offense up. And we've talked about that a ton, but when you're not playing the cleanest brand of football and you have, like you said, you have a couple incompletions, you have a couple drops, Terry has a drop on that drive, 2 drops on that drive, like, it's those are the plays with his legs that elevate the floor. And I think that's kind of the takeaway from the game is they didn't do a great job finding explosive plays. They had some pretty good rushing efficiency at points in the game, but they did have some negative, kind of bad neutral runs. And his ability to elevate with his legs, to me, is the story of the game, kind of.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's really impressive about him, and there's certain guys I think of through recent NFL history that are really good at this as well, is he just doesn't seem to take a ton of huge direct hits for as exposed as he is because he runs. I mean, he runs 16 times in this game, and certainly there's some times he gets wrapped up and thrown around, but the scariest hit he takes is obviously the one in the pocket where his knee bends back, and you're just like, okay, I guess you're Patrick Mahomes rubber man too. That's cool. Where Mahomes takes stuff like that and is able to bounce back. But like Russell Wilson was always great at this, and I guess probably still is to an extent. But certainly like prime, younger Russell Wilson, who scrambled a lot more, was always great at just not taking a direct shot. And whether it's you're able to get out of bounds, which he does a couple of times in this one, just that, hop skip on the sideline, or just kind of twisting his body at the last second so a guy glances off of him. And man, I will say this, it came up on a couple of other runs too for the running backs. Like the Atlanta Falcons tackling in the secondary leaves some to be desired. But they would hit Jayden, they'd hit Chris Rodriguez, they'd hit B-Rob, and they just bounce off. And so it's that ability to, and I will say, like, if we're doing a Falcons show, we're probably pretty ticked about the tackling on that front. By the same token, we're doing a Commander show, and I know that Dan Quinn preaches and they practice breaking tackles. I remember talking to Diami about that earlier this year, and I was like, wait, how do you practice breaking tackles? I always just kind of took for granted that that's a skill that some guys have and some guys don't, but like Dan looks at it as a technique. How do I break a tackle?
100%.
And they are good at it. And so I think that point is probably worth mentioning as well, is like there's some times in this game where guys have direct shots at him. He's able to twisting it toward his body and either minimize the impact and then maybe even fall forward and pick up a couple extra yards, or just straight up break a tackle and then make a play out either in the open field or kind of in more condensed space, just dive forward safely for a couple extra yards.
Yeah, no, I think that's 100% right. And the technique of breaking a tackle is a big thing. And you see him execute it. I think a lot of people say, oh, like just the simplest version is like when imagine you're playing tag with somebody, right? And you try to run away from them and they can just kind of run on the same angle with you and tag you. That's like what a lot of younger, like high school level, Pop Warner level players do. They think I'm fast, I'm just going to run away. But a good tackle breaker, and backs do this too. When you watch, I think this is something Bijan Robinson has evolved over the past couple seasons from his rookie year to this season, is you want to square up the tackler. People say, what? It's like you want to run right at the tackler, and when they stop their feet, then you have the advantage, right? Because they have to break down if they're going to hit you, right? So then I can work half a man. I can work right and left shoulder on the tackler, or I can kind of work a double stick and work to a speed kind of move. And I think when you watch Jayden, he has a pretty good feel for like, hey, we're square. Now I'm breaking leverages. Now I'm kind of forcing you out of a tough spot. And so, again, you see some of that. I think you saw more of that in this game than you've seen over the course of the year. And I think especially on the last drive of the game, the overtime drive, like he just kind of was like a little bit like devil may care in terms of like taking shots and like kind of trying to break tackles. And, Fletch on the broadcast is always like, man, he plays stronger than you would think, his ability to break tackles. But a lot of it is because he is good. He has a good feel for not taking those direct shots off the square setup that we just talked about, and he makes plays, and I think that's cool, and it's good to see him not taking big hits, but also it was also cool, I thought, to see him kind of ramp it up and be like, I'm okay with taking some shots here because this is a playoff game, game's on the line, let's get this thing done, and again to see him understand the difference, I think shows a lot of maturity on his part.
Last thing for Jayden before we kind of zoom out to the rest of the offense, and there's a lot of stuff to talk about there as well. We talked about the number of scrambles. Do you think he left, and sacks, frankly, is this stuff that he's leaving on the table as a thrower, or was this just the nature of the game that he actually did, like in terms of efficiency of what was available to him, not necessarily the offense? Obviously, like if you're taking on pressure, the offensive line theoretically should have been able to pick it up. So we can talk about that in a second. But in terms of what was available to him, do we feel like he maximized what was available?
Yeah, that's a really good question. One that's kind of unknowable, honestly. And I'm going to give you my take on it. Like there's a couple times where you're watching, 3rd and 5, 2nd and 5, and there's a deep crosser coming across the field. And they ran this concept pretty well. So they get like a shallow cross or a flat, and you get a post kind of clearing something out, and then you get that that kind of intermediate crosser coming across the field. And oftentimes I was like, you could probably make this throw, right? You could probably be really aggressive here. Like this is NFL open. I feel like the underneath hook players are kind of attaching to the underneath flat or shallow cross. Like put a little air on this thing and drop this in the bucket. That being said, on all of those times when that player was open, and again, it's a tight window. Like I want to make it very clear. It's not like you're getting a dude running wide open in secondary. It's right. Like they played a lot of man. The defender's in pretty close relationship, and it's like, do I love this? I don't know. Let's scramble. And I think that was the thing that I came out of it, was like his scrambling decisions led to first downs. And ultimately, that's the goal, right? Is to possess the football and stay on the field. So if he's making bad decisions as a scramblers and running into sacks or running for no gain, then we're going to have a conversation like, hey man, you got to sit in there and throw this ball. But if and that's kind of the double-edged sword of having a scrambling quarterback. If that's Tom Brady's throwing that ball, right? But that's Tom Brady's superpower. Jayden Daniels at this point in his career, that's not his superpower just yet. He does some really good stuff. Like I know Jamison Crowder's wide open underneath, but on that throw to Zach Ertz in the end zone, dude, like that is a big time, tight window, red zone NFL throw. Like that is a nice throw. And I understand why he does it, because you kind of see I think it's the safety. They're kind of matching the 2x2. He's like in between for a second. And so I don't hate that he bypasses Jameson to go to Zach on that. Doesn't bother me at all. But
it looks also way worse after he makes that throw so decisively that by the time the safety does anything, he's back in Zach's lap. And so Jameson looks extra wide open. But at the time that he makes that decision, it is a much muddier decision. And thus, there is the opportunity to hit Zach for a touchdown. And I don't even know if you can count that as a miss. I mean, the ball goes off Zach's hands. Tough catch, but goes off his hands.
I actually count it as like a big time throw, like because the tight window, the proximity of the defender. But my point, bringing that up, is he does do that. He does have the ability to get that done. I think the drop by OZ in the 2-minute drive before the end of the game, like that's a tight window throw over the middle of the field. That's a really nice job. But on the other ones where he kind of chooses to bypass, he's scrambling for first downs and possessing the ball. And on that 15-play drive, like you're staying on the field. And I think ultimately that's what you're looking for. And again, if he was making worse decisions in those moments, I would be more critical of it. But I also think like this is who he is as a player and this is what he's good at. And I'm going to lean into this as a coach. And I think you see Kliff doing that a little bit. Yeah,
I think he missed throws accuracy wise more than he missed opportunities in this game. Like there's a couple of those too that you talked about, some of those crossers where you pause the tape and you're like, why isn't this ball out? And you're like, oh, because he's in scramble posture.
Yeah.
So there's some pressure, and like you said, you'd rather leave a half second early than a half second late, and you go scramble, get the first down. And I think sometimes part of being a great scrambler is being really decisive. But like on that 15-play drive, he misses like a swing pass to Jeremy McNichols. They did run that fake screen to Crowder, and he throws it just a touch behind him. That's a tough one because the window's really tight. But like that's a throw that he has hit at times this year.
And Jameson probably could catch that, but again, like he makes it harder than Jayden makes it harder than it needs to for both people. You know what I mean? He kind of has like this weird back shoulder, and
Yeah, so there's a couple of throws like that where you're just like, oh, that's weird. I mean, the pick, that's a hell of a defensive play. That's a great design. But he handled it way better later in the game as they continue to run that pressure, and they also changed up some of the protection there. So I just think that. But
also to your point, like, he has the slant to Terry on that 15-play drive, which is just a little bit out in front. And I know Terry would tell you he's got to make that play 100%. And then they come back, I want to say it's like 2 plays later, and they run that dig over the middle of the field to Terry. And great job by Jayden getting where you're supposed to go, but that ball is a little bit far out in front. And, Bram brought this up because, Terry had like limited practice this in the week because of the ankle or whatever. And maybe the timing's a little bit off. But yeah, like there's 2 examples where we're just not quite on the same page with Terry and we don't get completions there. So is that an accuracy thing? Is that a thing with Terry? I don't know. But I do think the Jameson one's a really good example too of like, hey, like this is one you've made. We just kind of missed it. And over the course of the last couple of weeks, he has those throws. But again, every quarterback, when you watch them, has misses. It just depends on the frequency and whether you can live with the variance of their incompletion percentage.
Yeah, and also, how do you make up for it? And you do things like you do on the Ertz 37-yarder where he creates something out of nothing, and then Zach rumbles down the field for the big gain. But like that should be a sack, and it's not. And so I think overall, his ability to create, and also, as we're going to talk about now, like the options Kliff has as a play caller because of his mobility to get you out of some ruts, I think are pretty major as well.
Yeah, I mean, and then the 4th down decision making too. I think that's the other thing. Is obviously there's the 4th and 2 where they kind of have that design boot rollout, which is to my eye, it's not personnel wise the same play as the New Orleans game. Remember how they called that play down the red zone, but from a execution, like you probably call that play the same thing. You just have different people in, and great job by Bryson Tremaine sealing that edge off. But like, you see like how you execute the correct technique, you get a first down. Then there's the 4th and 5 where McNichols makes sure he chips out on the right guy. Everyone clears out, gets the ball where it's got to go. Because again, like tight windows in the back end there because of how they're playing that coverage wise. So, and again, he's not he's not scrambling in that situation, but just making good decisions, kind of to your point, like as a scrambler, when to throw, what can I get away with, and a great execution by McNichols on that play specifically to kind of figure it out. Then there's the one in the red zone where they score the touchdown to OZ, which is also a 4th and 2, I want to say. Yep. And again, like great call because you're getting your guy on the perimeter as a runner, but you give him opportunities to throw football. And talk about just a tremendous throw. Like,
oh my God, I'm glad you brought that up. That point, that throw is ridiculous. He's rolling to his left and sidearm like contorts his body. I don't know how he makes that throw.
Yeah, the ability to just generate enough torque in your upper body while you're running, like you're sprinting to your left, and kind of get that whip of the wrist. Like it was really impressive that the ball got there, even, because I was standing. Obviously you watch the L22, but I was standing right behind, like in the end zone basically. And I was like, there's no way he's going to be able to get this ball here because he's too far ahead of the receiver. He's in bad relationship. And so great job by
He's got to throw around a guy.
Yeah.
Like that's the other part is like that ball's got to be sidearmed, not just because of kind of his body position, but like he's got to get that back to the receiver. Like you said, he's too far ahead and there's a guy right in front of him. So he's got to throw it like back to his right running left. It is a sick throw.
Yeah, no, 100%. And again, like to the original point about Kliff kind of using him as a runner, like think about that in those 4th down situations. And obviously on the one McNichols, it's not, but he's making a good decision as a passer because he could scramble if he wanted to. And I think that's where you feel comfortable going for it on 4th down is, hey, if the play isn't there, we've got a guy who's special. And you think back to the New Orleans game on some of those 4th downs where he's jiving over the pile and making things happen for you. Like, He's been excellent in those moments, and Kliff definitely is calling plays in those moments specifically where he can be a runner and a thrower. And I think that's exactly what you want to be doing in those moments. And it is special. It is special because he's a special athlete, but also great by the play caller of understanding like what he does well and how to maximize the offense in those high leverage moments.
And the head coach to say, go. That was what I was hoping for a couple weeks ago. I kept saying, like, I want a little more Dan Campbell in my Dan Quinn. I want a guy who goes, we have the best player on the field. We trust him on 4th down. And in this game, time and time and time again, Dan was just like, go, 4th and 5, 4th and 2, 4th and 1. And the ball was consistently in Jayden's hands in those spots. And he made him right every single time. I think they're now 19 of 22 on the year on 4th down. Take command. Logan Paulson there, Craig Hoffman here. Logan, let's talk about the offensive line. And let's start with the run game, and then we'll circle back to some of the pass protection and how those two things interplay. But I said last week, I was like, I wonder if they just run a lot more straightforward stuff this week. Let's kill some of the pullers. Like if the whole goal is to fire off the ball and get going, maybe they'll just run a bunch of inside zone or duo and see if they can fire off the ball. Well, they tried, and in the first half, it didn't go so great. And then they found some things in the second half. They brought in some of the bounce. They brought in some of the GT. They brought in some of their best plays. And then were able to mix in some of the other stuff that they kind of more of their regular run formula and really got the run game going in the second half. What did you see from kind of the supporting plan, if you will? We just talked so much about Jayden, but the supporting plan is specifically the run game in this game.
Yeah, I think when you look at kind of their most effective runs, and it kind of falls in the vein of the season. And so what I'm going to say is that, like, obviously the zone read was really effective. There's an explosive run where Jayden keeps it, and there's an explosive run after that where he hands it off to B-Rob. I think it's like a 12-yard gain, something like that. So obviously that's a big part of the offense. And the problem with zone read is you're going to have some kind of neutral or not good runs, but it does give you this opportunity for explosive plays. And obviously the zone read, for people who don't know, is like when Jayden is reading the defensive end, and the defensive end stays, he hands it to the running back. If the defensive end collapses, he pulls it. And I will say he made Matthew Judon look kind of not great on one of those plays, like that was a tough look for him. And then I think the other thing that popped out is when they were able to get Atlanta in their 4-down spacing, they ran what I would call like influence trap. Some people call it straight trap. So basically like the 3 technique is, imagine you've got your offensive line. There's a guy over the guard, right? He's the 3 technique. He's going to shoot up the field. Think you're Grady Jarrett's, right? Really big penetrator. You're going to just pull and trap that guy and knock him out of his gap And the way they ran it is they would pull two guys basically. And I know you're not technically pulling the center, but it basically feels like you're pulling two players. The linebackers play across. It lets you, on the people releasing to the second level, get there. And they ran that play twice with really excellent success. And and it's a play that they haven't run a ton of. And so it was really good to see them again. B-Rob hits an explosive on it, I want to say, in the second quarter. And he also hits an explosive on it in the third quarter. And they tried to run it with Chris Rodriguez on that. I think it was the first down in the red zone where he has a 4-yard run and breaks like 12 tackles. He breaks 4 tackles. But that's the best 4-yard run I've ever seen, quite honestly.
That was crazy.
It was tremendous. But they ran it with some like kind of middling success. They had 2 really explosive plays and then 2 plays that were just okay. And then they ran like a wham, like where they kind of bring the tight end back across and were able to. So in terms of stuff that they normally run, like they didn't really run a lot of GT. They ran 1 bounce. It was for the touchdown to Chris Rodriguez. And that gets a little bit dicey because Bates gives up penetration, but great job by Cosme kind of fighting through the foot traffic, makes a great block on the safety. And then the center does a really good job of getting to the second level and kind of making a wall there. And Chris breaks a tackle and gets in there. So in terms of stuff that's worked, zone read, trap was really effective. But again, like to your point, there was 4 or 5 runs that were what I would say like really efficient and good that led to explosive opportunities. And the other stuff was a little bit kind of middling. And I think that's one of the reasons you see a lot of quarterback runs down in the low red from Kliff, because you don't have a ton of confidence in the consistency of it, right? Like I think when you compare it or juxtapose it to the Atlanta rushing attack, think about how efficient that thing was in the first half, right? Where there's lanes, there's creases, they're running they ran a little bit of duo, which we'll talk about here in a second, but there was a confidence that you could just kind of call whatever and they were going to make it work. And while there was some efficiency to the rushing attack, I didn't feel the down to down consistency like you're talking about. There's a bunch of plays where they're trying to run a duo or trying to run like a tight zone wanda where you're getting those tight double teams and Grady Jarrett splits it and blows it up in the backfield for a 0-yard gain. And great job by Grady, like in terms of his ability to split double teams and sit a knee and make plays. But I think that's how I would characterize the rushing attack. Some stuff was really hyper efficient, but there was other things that just didn't look super sharp.
Yeah. I think their best drive of the game, running wise, was their first drive of the fourth quarter. And it is the drive that ends on the Cosme hold, what should have been the OZ game sealing touchdown with 4:43 to go. But they start off that drive in 12 personnel and do this little play action half roll, and then it's just an easy comeback to OZ. And they basically win at the line of scrimmage. They win on alignment there where there's just not enough dudes in coverage because they're expecting run. And OZ breaks tackle, gets 16 yards. And then they bring Zach on the field. Atlanta goes back to their nickel personnel, and it's a zone read keeper. They get huge movement. They finally really win at the line of scrimmage on a duo play. B-Rob gets 11. I think the next play is the big bounce play where B-Rob gets 12. They run a wham. They run another little half roll, play action fake. That's the one where John Bates almost kills a guy at the goal line. And then they do some silly stuff once they get in the red zone.
Old Y-Leak right there.
Yeah, one of my favorites. Love the Y-Leak.
Love the setup there too. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and so they got it going there, but I think outside of that drive, it's a lot of hit or miss on the runs, and I think there's a couple missed assignments. I remember one play where Coleman goes the wrong way, or no, sorry, not Coleman. Trent Scott goes the wrong way, and you're like, ugh, because it's blocked up really well otherwise. But I think by and large, they just didn't get the movement up front early in this game. And for a team that was really talking about, we want to fire off the ball, we want to move people, we want to be physical, I'm curious how you saw that element. Because just because you try hard doesn't mean you're going to get results. It's the NFL. The other guys are paid too. But did you feel like from a technique standpoint and from kind of what they set out to accomplish based off their own stated goal of firing off the ball and moving people, like they were doing that at a good enough level, especially early in this game?
I think it was better. I think it was better than what you saw versus Philly and what you saw versus New Orleans. I do think you're running into some issues from a talent standpoint, you know what I mean? And so for example, some of the best run games that I've been a part of, obviously, as a player, the coaches really understand like what you're good at and like where you're weak, you know. And I think as the season's going on, you're seeing this team and this coaching staff have to understand that a little bit more. Like we're not, at least to my eye, like I think these guys are really good football players. I enjoy watching them. I enjoy how they play, the energy, the effort, the attitude that they play with. But you also understand like what they're good at. And to me, they're not guys that are just going to like sink double teams and move you off the spot. Like that's not who they are, right? So we got get a little bit creative, and that's where like the GT stuff comes in. That's where the bounce stuff comes in. And that's where I really like the addition of kind of this influence trap, right? Because with influence trap, the guys kind of blocking themselves, and you're using the defenders are blocking themselves, and you're kind of using your athleticism to get there and kind of move guys off position, right? It's like a surprise, you know. And I understand like you got to have some tough runs, but that's kind of what your zone read has been for this year, right? Like it's a way to kind of loosen up the defensive line and linebackers because the quarterback can keep the football. And I know that's not always the most efficient, but in this game, you 25-yard carry by Jayden Daniels and a 12-yard carry by B-Rob. So awesome job. Love that. So I think that's where I think the run game's got to go. You got to think like, do we like these matchups? Like we have to just be a little bit more fastidious about, hey, like, we can't just call whatever we want. Like early in the year, like they were really good at running Wanda. They had a lot of variations off of it, and it was really effective. But I think as the year's gone on, teams have kind of figured that out. They've kind of figured out that we like to run GT and bounce a lot, and they've got solutions, right? They penetrate, they get up the field, they close in a certain way. So now it's like, okay, what's the next step? And so it was nice to me to see some kind of innovation there with the trap stuff, which again led to some explosive opportunities. And so now it's just how do you keep putting these guys who are good athletes and good competitors in the best position to be successful? And I know that is, as a coach, that's really, really hard to do because you're not always going to be able to like win with the pen, and they got to win matchups on their own sometimes. But I think that's the way that the running game is going to need to go as they get into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that you see some of that creativity as the game goes too. And some of it's simple and fairly nuanced where like even the timing of some motions, and like if Bates is going to be a sifter on inside zone or tight zone, right? Sometimes it's at the snap, he's running back across the formation and trying to run his face into Matthew Judon or whoever on the other side. Sometimes they motion him and it's before the snap that he's hitting kind of the same assignment. It's just the line on the paper goes from a straight line across to a dotted line because that indicates motion when coaches are drawing up plays. And you see the impact that has of kind of slowing that edge player down, coming back inside. It opens up a little bit more of a cutback lane at times. You see some of the jet motion in this game, the orbit motion. You see an actual jet sweep end around to Olamide Zaccheaus, which then you see stuff off of that. And so I think Kliff did a really good job of sequencing plays. They used some unbalanced lines at times, again, in this game. And sometimes they run at the weak side, if you will, right? Like you move Brandon Coleman from left tackle to whatever you want to call that right tackle position. I don't know whether you call it new right tackle or a tight end.
Right tight end. He's the big tight end, yeah.
Yeah, and then they'd have Bates and Sennett or Bates and Ertz next to Allegretti on the left. And I think the 25-yard Jayden carry, if I'm remembering correctly, is off of that, where it's not like, I guess technically it's a zone read, but I don't even know if he's reading that. I think it just looks like zone read, and he's keeping that thing all the way.
He's for sure reading it. It's just, but again, like I think he had one.
But the edge is just so sealed. There's not like an unblocked player that's right there, you know?
It was there's two. So he runs one, obviously where Matthew Judon, and he just beats him to the edge. And there's another one where, like, based on formation, you're like in a two receiver set, and they walk the read player, and so the read player then becomes I guess the weak side inside linebacker who's running to the line of scrimmage. And he had one again. They ran the play twice where he gave it, and it gets a little bit messy because the 4-eye is playing across the tackle's face, and it kind of just makes a big muddy pile in there for B-Rob to run into. And so he's like, I'm going to pull it. And so it's basically like, I don't know if I would coach him to pull that, but like, Jayden Daniels is a better athlete than Caden Ellis, and I'm going to get 7 yards. And so it's essentially that's what it boiled down to me, was like, is that like the perfect pull look? Probably not, but like, I'm a better athlete than you. And that's one thing about having a quarterback that can do that kind of stuff, is like, even if he's not making the best decision as a puller, or maybe it's something, maybe that's an unscouted look, for example, I'm going to make you right. And I think that's, again, what we talk about, what makes this performance from Jayden special. Some of these elements are what makes him special. Like even the one to Judon, like I would not have pulled that because Judon does not move his feet. Like he kind of plays it like that kind of classic read technique. But Jayden's like, Judon, I'm faster than you. I'm just going to beat you to the edge, and there's no contained player.
Right.
So big play.
Right. And they also use the fact that like certain situations, Falcons probably going to play man, and like Terry's able to just run the corner off, and all of a sudden that's why there's no contained player. So like there's some real nuance and creativity to the run game. And again, whether it's that read player being on the second level where Jayden just has a better angle and he knows he can win to the edge, versus him being in the guy's face right at the mesh point. Like there's just little things that I think they found as the game went on that were really good. They run, I mean, that double fake truck taxi play where Jayden gets 5. It's a 5-yard game, but like it is so blocked up. And I just imagine if you're the Falcons at that point being like, what am I supposed to be reading here? Like I gotta, because that's the same drive where they hit the end around to Zacchaeus, and then Zacchaeus is faking an end around on that play. They've also hit a couple of stretch plays, and they fake that. They fake the reverse, and then Jayden starts to take off, and so then you're able to get back to some simpler stuff on the ground because all of a sudden the linebacker's eyes are thrown off. And so I think that's like one of the things that makes Kliff special is eventually he'll just throw you off, and then you can get back to some of your more basic stuff because the defense is unsettled.
No, I think that's right. And that's kind of what we were just talking about, right? Like we're not the Philadelphia Eagles, right? We're not going to be able to just line up and be able to run duo and Wanda and just straight outside zone. Like I love that there's little wrinkles there to just increase the efficiency. Like you're talking about, like to the jet sweep to OZ, like great job by OZ. That's an 8-yard gain. Or the fake reverse that where B-Rob's a wildcat guy and he fakes the reverse to Jayden and it's a 6-yard gain. Like, those are productive plays that put your guys in better positions to be successful. They create better angles to the second level. And like, that's big time stuff. And it's again, like what's the wrinkle of the zone read? Like we just talked about getting in that formation where they have to walk the will linebacker out, like just to make it create a little bit more space. Like I love that kind of stuff. And I'm not sure if that's Anthony Lynn who's doing that, but everybody involved in the offense, like I think that's where you got to kind of hunt and peck and grind for those details. And I think the one problem with that, and the important thing to point out there, is if you're wrong as a coaching staff, then it becomes a long day running the football. But I like that there were some wrinkles here. And I don't remember what B-Rob ended up averaging, but I think it was much better.
He averaged 4.6.
Yeah, it was much better
13 for 60.
Yeah, much better than it's been over the last couple of weeks. And again, you get heroic efforts like Chris Rodriguez had on the touchdown and on that first yard run we just talked about. But I think on the whole, like I like the innovation. And again, you talked about, the techniques and the combinations. And at this point, I'm not sure that's who these guys are. Like they're not going to be able just to blow you off the ball. And so, and most offensive lines are. Like when we're talking about those blow off the ball kind of guys, you're talking about Detroit, you're talking about Philly, and like maybe Atlanta. I don't know if you want to put them in there, but that's the kind of groups you're talking about. Lots of first round picks, lots of big, strong, physical dudes. And so I like that we're being innovative. We're finding some new stuff to do, and hopefully they can keep that going, on a long playoff run, which would be great. So,
yeah. I will say if they got to get Biotish back, getting Wiley or Lucas back in there is going to be very helpful as well, from both the communication and just like let's get better movement. Let's get to the second level quicker. Just
getting things targeted.
I'm not trying to be mean to Michael Dieter, but like Tyler Biotish is a significantly better player.
And Dieter, I think that's the other thing is being a backup player is hard. Like I was a backup player for a big chunk of my career. It's hard to come in and execute at a super high level. And there's a reason you're a backup player. Like it's harder to win one-on-ones. It's harder to win in pass pro. And like if you were better,
you don't get the reps during the week. It's all that stuff.
And so like if I was a better player, I'd be the starter, right? Like that's kind of how it works out. You know what I'm saying? So like, and again, this is not a knock on Dieter, but there is a significant drop off in the pre-snap penalties for whatever reason when he comes in, and also with some of the one-on-one stuff. And he had some really, we're going to be critical of him, but we're also going to give him a compliment. Like great block on the touchdown. It was a third down run to B-Rob, I want to say, where B-Rob had like an 8-yard gain, where he does a great job reaching the 2Y, like really tough block. So he did some really good things, but again, there's just a little bit of a drop off because Biotish, I think right now, is like probably a top 5 center in the NFL, at least the way he's played this year. So anytime you're losing a player of that caliber, it's going to be a significant drop off. So again, Dieter did some really good stuff where I was like, man, like in my notes, like great job, Dieter, like awesome. But also there's some stuff where you lose quick on a one-on-one in a pass pro situation, and Jayden's got to vacate a pocket. So there's a little give and take. But overall, like you're saying, if the O-line can get healthy, like that's always a huge issue. Because say what you want about Wiley as a pass protector, and like, is he a top 10 tackle in the NFL? No, but he's pretty damn good in the run game because he's fast. He can get guys cut off. He can get to combinations at the second level well. And you do feel his presence or his absence in the run game with these guys, especially because he's got really good chemistry with Cosme.
Right.
And so like there's all
I think
that.
You see that in this game too. There's a bunch of like stunts and twists and TEs and this and that. And they did not pick a lot of those up as well as they would if all the regular 5 starters were playing, which is why those guys are starters. Chris Rodriguez also, I cannot believe his stats are 5 for 16. That is the best 5 for 16 running back performance I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Last thing real quick on the offense, which we should have talked about maybe first. So my bad as the driver of the bus here. But the lack of explosive, not just plays, but the lack of explosive opportunities in this game, in the passing game. They're just, sometimes you watch the tape back and you're like, yeah, it's because they didn't throw and missed 7 deep shots in the game.
Yeah.
And that was not the case watching this tape. They obviously missed the one that they actually attempt to Terry, but like Jayden's spray chart, you don't have to zoom out very far to see all the throws in this one. And it wasn't, I think there was a lot of quick game called. What do you make of the game plan, why that was? I mean, we knew it'd be tough because they don't have any vertical speed outside of Terry. Diami's out in this game, and Noah Brown is out. But to not even really feel like they're trying it, one, is that accurate? And two, what do you make of it?
I think that's a really good question. I do think there are some shots down the field, like we talked about those like intermediate crossers, like those can be explosive plays, kind of chunk plays down the field. There's a couple digs, right? The one that they missed to Terry. There's the one that Ozzy, by his own admission said he dropped. Like those plays are explosive plays, but in terms of like shot plays, I don't see a lot of them. And again, like that is something that I'm a little concerned about, is like, how do you find explosive plays given the skill set that you have at receiver at the moment? And, obviously AJ Terrell did a great job with Terry. Like he just matched up and really, negated Terry's impact on this game. So, how do you find those? And I don't think it's surprising that on their touchdown drives, they do find explosive plays. Now, one comes on a busted coverage where Zach, rumbles for whatever is it, 40 yards and
37.
Then the other one is Jayden keeping it for 25 yards on his own read. So there are other ways they're getting to explosive plays, but as you play better teams, as you kind of make this push into the playoffs, like how do you find those ops? And again, I like the call to John Bates in the low red on the leak, where like that's kind of a manufactured explosive, which is great, but that's something that I find a little concerning. And while I'm concerned about that, I also think Jayden scrambling, the design quarterback runs, and the quick game also raise the floor of this offense significantly. So it's not quite as important because they're super, super hyper efficient at that stuff. But it's something to keep an eye on definitely moving forward.
If they can just not commit penalties, they can actually play this way.
Yeah. Which is surprising, which is like crazy because it's like not many teams can do this.
Right. And that's the thing, is how often have we talked about for the Commanders defense, just don't break and the other team will mess it up. And that is typical in the NFL. This team can actually play pretty clean football, in part because Jayden will extend the drive once or twice with his legs, either by extending a play and finding a dump off, or actually just running for the first down himself. But we've seen consistently this team doesn't go 3 and out a ton. They picked a real bad time for their second one of the game on Sunday late, but by and large, they don't go 3 and out a ton. They move the ball. They'll play the field position game a little bit. Even if they wind up punting, it's typically after 1 or 2 first downs, so your field position is not too bad, but they also just have been able to drive the ball up and down the field on teams all year between the 20s, and then it becomes a game of whether or not they can execute in the red zone, and they've been better in the second half of the season. But they literally attempted 1 pass over 20 yards in this game, and it was the deep shot to Terry that he misses. It's the same. It's a slot fade. It's the same ball that he hits Well, I guess technically it's not the same exact play because last time they didn't actually line anybody outside of Terry in the Philly game. But it's basically the same route from the same spot. It's just there's I think Jameson's lined up outside him this time. But he misses it, and it's because it's a hard throw, and they made it look easy in the Philly game. But yeah, it definitely was interesting to watch. There's just not a ton because, in part, they don't have the horses to do it. Like, I just don't know who's running those routes besides Terry. And I also think the last thing we should talk about is like Terry only one catch, 5 yards in the game, and I don't necessarily, after watching it back, feel like he was super ignored or they didn't try to get him the ball. Like there's a batted ball in the third quarter, I think it is, maybe it's the fourth, where he's wide open on a slant and Jayden throws it to him and unfortunately 53 for Atlanta just makes a good play. He's getting blocked in the line, like good block by Chris Rodriguez, and he just gets his hands up and knocks it down. That's probably a 20-yard gain if Terry catches it because he's catching it on the move and able to run. But Terrell did a good job. They tried to get him the ball in a couple other times and they're incompletions. So this wasn't a game where like Terry was super ignored. Like there wasn't a concerted effort at times to get him the ball. It just didn't work out. And for as great as Terry is, especially if he's a little bit banged up, that's going to happen.
Yeah, no, I think there were times where I was watching him run routes, like in cuts and things where he's usually pretty excellent at it and just looked like, 87, 89%, not quite 100%. And I think when you're going up against a guy like AJ Terrell, who again, his movement skills in the secondary are really impressive. And I know he's had kind of some inconsistencies over the course of his career, but he was impressive in this game in terms of his ability to cover and stay in good phase. And that's going to be challenging. And so hopefully Terry gets healthy because, again, he's been a big part of the explosive elements of this offense. But I do feel like they're definitely, maybe it was 5%, but there was a 5% difference. And sometimes that's all it takes to not be as effective. So something to keep an eye on definitely moving forward. For
sure. Anything else on the offense before we talk about the defense and what they did?
No, I think that's it. Great day by Jayden Daniels and obviously OZ. I mean, like his ability to. I think that's the other thing too with OZ. Some of the quick game stuff, some of his strength as a runner really showed up. Taking a 6-yard gain, making it 10. They talk about the jet sweep and his ability to kind of break a tackle and fall forward for 10 on that. Like that, lots of hidden yards there just from his ability as a runner to kind of elevate some of that lower leverage quarterback stuff with the quick game and make it not explosive plays, but 10, 12-yard chunk. So kudos to him. And just everyone's kind of got a role. You know what I mean? Like OZ explosive play versus Philly, Jamison Crowder 2 touchdowns, Zach Ertz big game this week. Like they're kind of in a land where without having Noah Brown and a banged up Terry, like people are having to step up and fill different roles. So really curious to see how that goes over the next couple of weeks. And I think Dallas will be a good kind of like where they're at in terms of some of these role players having to step up.
Take Command Podcast. Craig Hoffman here, Logan Paulson there. And for the second straight week, Logan, the Commanders' run defense in the first half, very different than the Commanders' run defense in the second half. In the first half, Bijan Robinson, a big day. In the second half, they make a couple of key changes. We talked about it on the postgame show, and that seems to change the game. After watching it back, though, how much was the change the Commanders made versus maybe some other things that they did from an execution standpoint or from some decisions the Falcons made that changed the course of this game?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to sound lame, but it really comes down to run fits in the first half. Like, even on the first play of the game, they run a really beautiful kind of linebacker defensive end exchange. So Armstrong is moving from kind of your traditional 5 technique. He kind of stunts to a 3, kind of attacking that B gap. And then the linebacker scrapes and he's the contained player. It should be a tackle for loss. Daron Payne plays around the backside tackle. Who's doing a good job on the cutoff, and there's a little crease there, and Bijan Robinson runs for, 8 yards, 9 yards on that first play of the game.
7-yarder, that should have been a -2. And we talked about how Robinson was having an all-time missed tackle season, and that his first missed tackle of the game would be his 100th forced on the year, and he wasted literally no time getting that done.
Yeah, 100%. And so on that one, it's like, good call, pretty good execution. Daron's a little bit out of a gap, and it ends up being a big play. And we're talking, it's very small. It's very small because he plays back door. He's playing over top, and the tackle literally is able to slow him down just a little bit. And Bijan's able to take advantage. And I think when you look at the game, like I think Duran did some really excellent stuff, but there are plays like that, right? There's another play where they're running like a little sift, right? Like Wanda, so away from the tight end, they're bringing the tight end back to sift the backside player. It's Jeremy Chin. He gets a little bit high, thinking that it's keeper. The tight end blocks him. He's out of his gap. Luvu's in this huge hole, and Bijan's able to hit it for 8 or 10, right? So that was something else. So run fits. I also think that Atlanta ran a little bit more like duo than I thought they would run, and Drake London as a blocking matchup was a huge mismatch in a way that I was not expecting. So basically what they do, they short motion him down. He'd crack Jeremy Chin, and Jeremy Chin obviously is a tremendous run player, right? And the tight end did a great job kind of keeping a neutral on the defensive end, and sometimes it's a big body in there, but just kind of stalemating that. Bijan bounces it to the perimeter, and then you got Davis or St. Juice or Sanderson having to make a tackle, and that's a matchup that I hate for us, especially because when London would motion down, he can still technically run a route. So they'd get a little bit of depth, get soft, and then they would just bounce to the perimeter. And they probably hit 5 of those for some semi-explosive, 8, 9, 10, maybe 12-yard runs. And that was just tough. And so there was a couple factors like that in the first half. Run fits, kind of getting some stuff that they don't run a lot of, like the duo is like an inside run. We were expecting, or at least I was expecting a lot more perimeter runs. So the fits, kind of the schematic differences, and then kind of transitioning to the second half, I do think that the coaches did a good job of making some corrections, but I also think that for whatever reason, Atlanta just didn't call as many runs, and they kind of threw the ball when I would kind of push back and say we should still be trying to run the football here on first down. So I think there was a schematic element that changed in the second half. They were much more consistent with their run fits, but also Atlanta kind of was like, hey, we're maybe feeling the pressure of not having possessed the ball at all in the third quarter. And you'd have to ask them if that's what they were feeling or not.
Yeah, I also wonder with the change to Daron Payne and the edge, like, do they decide to just say, like, it's not worth it? Like, we think we have better pass personnel on the field, so we're going to roll with that. Like, we don't know what the reason was. Certainly the game flow and not having the ball much could have been the decision too. But I think as you explain that, I'm thinking back to what I watched, and talk about the run fit change. I feel like in the first half, the edges were like, we have to get upfield. We have to set this edge. Yeah. And they would then over pursue. And whether it was Duran or Jalen Holmes, and again, the sample size is small, but those were the two guys that mainly were on the edges in the second half. They much more were like, I'm not going to try to penetrate past the guy blocking me. I'm just going to try to move him up and give Bijan nowhere to go. And that really was able to stifle down the run game. And, the first 2 carries of the second half, it's a 1st and 10 that goes nowhere. And then they pass. They have a quick pass and then a run on second down on their second drive. And that run is stuffed for 2. And John Allen, by the way, welcome back, made a couple of really nice plays. And he has some nice pursuit on that one. And I think that difference of just, talk about fitting the run and like how they were trying to set the edge, which then set up everyone else, I think was really nice. And then obviously add in the fact they just didn't have to do it nearly as often. And you have a much better second half and a much more successful day than the first half where they ran all over you.
No, 100%. And I also think that there was some stuff that popped up in the first half where they're kind of, where they're using kind of motions to kind of,
and the footwork, just real quick, like some of the ways that like Penix would reverse pivot or fake it here, like there's some little window dressing on their stuff that would slide the linebackers one way and just create the angles that they were looking for.
Yeah, 100%. And that's again what that offense, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur, Mike McDaniel's offense is so great at, is they're great at maximizing leverages for the offensive line. And there was a couple where they're running Wanda to a kind of like a cluster. There's 2 receivers over there. They motion the receiver out. The nickel player bumps out. And so the guy that's got that B gap as a run fit is now 10 yards off the ball, like away from where he's got to fit it. And you get Drake London cracking that guy, and there's a huge crease there. So now the crack player, now because you're cracking the safety with this guy, the person that's got to make the tackle is the outside corner who's running in to fit it. So there was some formational stuff that was challenging to deal with. And again, that was something that I was a little bit worried about coming into this game, because I said this to Bram, and again, he kind of balked at it. I was like, this is like one of the better offenses, maybe better than Philly in terms of problems they're going to present from like a formation standpoint. And that showed up a little bit in the first half. And obviously in the second half, you make some corrections, you bring in some bigger personnel. And I really think like one of the main takeaways was I actually thought the defensive line fit the runs pretty well in the first half. Obviously, there's some errors here and there, but really the thing that jumped out to me was the secondary, like the safeties, the linebackers, how they were fitting runs, and how they kind of would.
Frankie felt a little jumpy to me in this one.
A little jumpy, and Bobby had one where he thought the running back was cutting it back. He plays the backside A gap and he hits it to the front side. And again, that's part of the issue with dealing with a runner this skilled and an offensive line that's worked so long together, right? So there was a lot of that stuff in the first half. And then in the second half, like the run volume's way down. And like the first play that I'm thinking of is Michael Davis absolutely stones Drake London on outside zone to him. There's nowhere for the back to go. He can't stretch it. He's got to cut it back, and everybody's in there, and they make a nice tackle. So I think there was an improvement in the secondary fits in the second half of the game. And I also felt like for whatever reason, Atlanta kind of got away from what they did well in the first half. And I think so. It's kind of it's a combination of things, right? It's you make a personnel change. You're playing a little bit more straight cover 3 or more aggressive quarters in the second half where that run fit player's coming down and everyone's got a gap. It's a little bit simpler. I also felt like they got away from some of their formational stuff and some of their motion stuff that made them so effective in the first half. So I think it was kind of both those things contributing to a more effective defensive performance in the second half of this ball game.
Yeah, I'm definitely surprised at how they changed it up, because obviously Atlanta, the most they're down is 24-17. So it's not like they're down in any significant way in this game from a score standpoint that they couldn't continue to run the football. And I think if you're Washington, you're putting some of that heavier personnel, you're doing some of those things and being like, look, if this rookie quarterback is going to beat us, then okay, he's going to beat us. And Michael Penix misses some throws, obviously, in this game.
Yeah.
Then Raheem Morris mismanages the clock and doesn't maximize a couple of opportunities, and you're able to escape with an overtime win. On the passing side of it, the pass defense, the corner play in this one is big yikes. And it's not just Michael Davis. People are going to get on Michael Davis because there's a bunch of high-profile plays. But Mike Sanders still had a really, really bad day as well at the office. And some of this is really good, smart design and some cool stuff by Atlanta that makes their jobs really, really difficult. Their use of Robinson as a receiver, and if Kyle Pitts and splitting him out, you get some one-on-ones, but Jeremy Chin actually does a pretty good job holding his own on Pitts on the outside, where he's basically playing outside corner on Kyle Pitts. But there's also one of the, I think, 3rd and longs or 4th and longs later in the game where they split Pitts out and then put London in the slot. Well, because Michael Davis is the outermost guy on that side, he's basically playing slot corner because he's over Drake London, because they're playing man-to-man and there's a safety on Pitts on the outside, and that puts in a very key situation Drake London with a two-way go on Michael Davis. That's a huge advantage for the Atlanta Falcons by alignment alone, and they hit a deep out and get the first down. So there's things like that Atlanta does that I think are really smart and really good, but also, there's some Sanders still on the technique side. There's some stuff where you're just like, what are you doing? He just does not seem locked into, being able to react. It feels, I don't want to say lazy, because obviously, he's playing out there professional football. Mike Sanders still is competitive as hell. It's not lazy, but it's just it's undetailed. And I think that Atlanta took advantage of that in a major way. And hopefully he can bounce back and have a good one. But this is, I think, ultimately a reminder that this was not the plan for Mike Sanders still. Getting Marshawn Lattimore back is enormous. And I also, I'll take the comments bullets on this one, but I would play Benjamin St-Juste over Michael Davis next game, because I think the ceiling is higher. And if Ben can just play with confidence, I actually thought he played pretty well in his very limited snaps in this game, then you're getting a better product than what you get with Michael Davis. It's not going to be all pro. It's not going to be Pro Bowl. It may not even be great, but it's going to, I think, be better than what you saw in this one. Yeah, no,
I think that's right. And I think you got to give credit to Drake London, and he's a special football player, and you see that. You see that in his physicality in the run game. You see that in some of the stuff he does, and how he kind of subtly stems and uses sticks and stuff, indicators to beat and break leverage. But also, I think one of the things I was concerned about coming in, like in the same way that there's multi-formations and multiple personnel groupings you're dealing with as a coverage group, you're also dealing as a run-stopping group. You're dealing with those same things as a coverage group too, and it does kind of slow you down. You're kind of like, what is my rule? Who's my fit? Like who's my responsibility? And again, they played a lot of man, but understanding like how you're going to pass stuff up and where your help is when you're seeing multiple formations, I do think kind of can make things challenging. And they did make a lot of plays in the second half. Like I thought there was a couple really nice reps of two-man where they're able to get sacks and guys are playing good leverage underneath and the rush is able to get home and it just works out in a really nice way. But obviously there are mistakes, and there's a couple where, you're in one-on-one situation with Drake London because of the formation and you're able to hit a big out or hit a comeback and you're losing leverage, all those different things. And again, like it was something that leading up to the game I was a little bit worried about because it's different. It's more diverse than anything they've seen over the past couple of weeks. And that's one of the benefits of this style of offense is it's constantly checking your rules. It's constantly finding better matchups and putting guys in positions where they're not used to being in. But overall, they were able to get the win, and it's an interesting conversation because like Quan Martin, for example, loses Bijan Robinson on that slant and go. There's a couple other ones where guys are running open down the field, like the corner versus zero that Michael Penix misses to Drake London. You're kind of like, oh, like there were opportunities, but this is the deal when you play quarterbacks that are not top shelf guys. Like they're not going to hit every throw. Like if you're playing Joe Burrow, you're probably like, damn, we're in a spot of trouble. But you don't call the game the same way. You don't execute it the same way.
Exactly.
And like this is why people are constantly hunting for that good guy. Because if you have Tom Brady on the Atlanta Falcons, they win this game. But no, he's not coming out of retirement for the Atlanta Falcons. You know what I'm saying? Like so, like even though there were some opportunities and some kind of, like you said, some leverage things, some assignment things. They weren't able to capitalize on it, and ultimately it was a good enough performance to win the game.
Michael Penix is not a touch thrower. He has a cannon. He can hit anywhere on the field. He'll drive a ball as well as anyone, but this is not a guy, and this is who he was in college, and I kind of laughed sometimes. People would be like, oh, what do you mean he's not accurate? And like his numbers were really good and all that kind of stuff, and I'm like, just watch the consistency with which he misses some of these throws. And again, he can throw the ball 60 yards down the field on a rope, but like, can you throw the ball 60 yards down the field with loft on it so your receiver can run under it? That's the question. And he's not that guy. And so you see that lack of precision down the field in this game. And, the Commanders played some man coverage where they were in trail technique and they're like, if you can loft this ball over us and dot a guy, we'll let you, but like, we'll tip our hat and say, okay, good job. And he couldn't consistently. And for a guy that is that kind of thrower and hasn't had a ton of reps with these guys because he just took over the starting job 2 weeks ago, job well done, I think, if you're the Commanders. Last thing, the rush plan in this game. I thought was interesting. They ran in the first half a ton of just four-man rush, like let's stunt, let's twist. And the Falcons are actually pretty good at picking that stuff up. So didn't always love that versus, hey, can we just get some one-on-ones and get some wins, or can we, maybe bring some simulated pressures and make it a little bit more confusing? And it feels like in the second half they did some of that stuff, which also, by the way, makes it harder on Penix because he hasn't seen a lot of that stuff. Like that's NFL rushes, that's NFL blitzes that you don't see a ton in college. It's his second NFL game. The first one was against the Giants, who don't do a ton of that stuff. And so I think I like the rush plan better in the second half. There are also more opportunities, as you said. That good play they have on first and second down in the second half, and the Falcons choosing to throw the ball and having some misses in those spots creates third and longs in the first place. But what do you think of their ability to get pressure in this one and how it evolved over the course of the game?
Yeah, I think I don't hate the plan necessarily. I don't have a lot of criticism or comment on that because it's stuff that I think worked at times. Like the one sack force fumble they're able to get, or two of them are off kind of line stunts in games and just kind of changing angles for the offensive line. But I also think like that's a good group in Atlanta. And I know we didn't talk about them as a great pass protecting group. And honestly, like there's times this year where they haven't been a great pass protecting group, but they are a good group. That's 3 first rounders. There's a second round pick. There's a 4th round pick. it's all homegrown guys that have worked together a ton. And you can see that. And I think, like when you talk to people in the building, they're like, that group was more impressive than we thought they would be. And I think like you got to give them credit. And, it's always very telling when you're talking to people after the game. They're like, man, that offensive line was really good. And Drake London was really good. You know what I mean? Like the people that we're just talking about giving this team problems are better than they expected. And I really was impressed, honestly, with how well the offensive line played for Atlanta, specifically in the first half and as pass protecting the group. Like you're talking about, like they're trying to put them in difficult spots here. They're trying to make it challenging. And I also think the other thing, too, that jumped out to me in terms of how Joe Wood Jr. called the game, which I thought was smart. I thought he was very aware of the shot play, which in this game I think was absolutely essential. So you're not going to get as many 5-man rushes. You're not going to get as many, kind of overload pressures where you're blitzing Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner, and you're kind of playing straight man or cover one on the back end. I think they were just really smart, kind of saying, hey, we're going to play 2 safety shells. We're going to play quarters. We're going to get guys back. So we force him to kind of be, like to your point, hyper accurate and consistent working his way down the field. Because I don't care, even if you showed me that in college, like I don't think you can do that as a rookie quarterback usually. So if we can eliminate the running game and eliminate the shot play for the Atlanta Falcons, we're going to win the football game. And I think ultimately, like while that happened with kind of middling success in terms of, they gave up a 15-yard completion or a 20-yard completion there was nothing over the top. And I think when you say like that's probably a win, right? Because ultimately it gives your offense enough kind of time to kind of figure itself out in the first half, and you do end up winning the football game. So, but to your point, I like that. I like that there was more of an emphasis on saying, hey, we're going to force you to drive the length of the field and be super consistent throwing the football.
Yeah, and frankly, in the second half, like they go 3 and out, they go 6 and out, and then their final drive, they get 4:24 on the clock, and they get them to a 3rd and 5. That's the one where they get the big out to London. Okay, fine. You give up 1. They're on a 1st and 20, and then they get to 3rd and 11, and they get the stop there. And then it's 4th and 11, and that's the one that Sanders still gives up. You're just like, he's all turned around. They give him 31 yards. Right. And then they ultimately, thanks to the snap over dude's head, get to a 2nd and 26, give up a comeback fine for 13, but now it's 3rd and 13, like 3rd and goal from the 13. Really, really nice job on coverage there, where they force a tough throw, and it looks, I think, worse than it would be, because I think Noah's like pretty much there, and then he sees the throws way over and just stops running. So it looks like London's got a ton of separation. I don't know that he actually does. Mm-hmm. And then on 4th and goal, it's a great throw. Percy could play that a little bit better. Chin could play it a little bit better. But Penix moves Bobby out of the way with his eyes and just delivers a low strike, and Pitts makes a hell of a catch. But you give up a 4th and 11 and a 4th and 13, and typically, like on a regular drive, those are punts or a field goal. And so I think that they overall played pretty darn well in this game. And then on the last drive where they give up the field goal attempt that Patterson misses, like that PI, I hate with all of my soul. I thought that was a really Mooney runs up into Davis, and like they're trying to draw PI there. That's exactly what they're trying to do. And Mooney just runs up to Davis, 2-hand shoves him, and then as Michael is reacting to that, their hands get caught up and they call a PI. So yeah, not great. So that's the defense. Unless you have anything else to.
I don't really have anything. It's I do think that they're playing better defensively, which is exciting, and I do think that they are. I think they're at their best again when the offense is playing better, and that's not like revolutionary analysis there. But I think you look at that third quarter, like they're playing way better because the offense is possessing the heck out of the ball. You know what I mean? And it just lets them kind of be who they want to be, and they don't have to win the game for you. So I think they can do that. They've shown that at times like they can go, 2-3 quarters and really kind of batten down the hatches. But I ultimately think like they're at their best. They're the best version of themselves when the offense is playing well. And so again, like how does Kliff maximize that? How does Joe Wood Jr. maximize that? And again, like they're going to be playing some real deal football teams here coming up soon. So we can't wait to see how they do it.
For sure. All right. We will preview the Dallas game coming up on Thursday. This podcast is more than long enough. So we are done for today. If there's anything else that you have questions about, though, leave a comment and perhaps we'll talk about it on Thursday's pod, as we obviously already talked about the Cowboys once this season. Might have a little extra room to answer some questions. For Logan, I'm Craig. We will see you Thursday on Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command, which has a brand new home.
That's right. You can watch on YouTube at the Team 980.
You can also listen to full episodes in the free Odyssey app, which is now enabled with Apple CarPlay. So we'll just, follow you around.